August 11th, local planning agency meeting to order. And the roll.
Chairman Byrd,
Here.
Don Colapetro, Sam Vincent,
Here.
Bob Finnis,
Here.
Rex Sims, Meg Jacobson,
Here.
Carolyn Gallagher.
Here.
First of all, I'd like to welcome Meg to the panel, to the board, whatever we're called here. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, the first order of business is to review some ordinances. Madam?
Thank you. I'll read the title block into the record. This is an ordinance pertaining to impact fees in Bonita Springs, reducing the rate of the collection of road, community park, regional park impact fees for hotels for the duration of 2 years, providing for conflicts of law, severability, codification, scrivener's errors, inclusion in code, and an effective date. This ordinance has gone to council for their consideration to take a look at and to discuss. They've discussed the issue twice. First at a workshop that they held in July, and then more recently on last Wednesday, discussed it. And I apologize, the draft you have here, did they receive the memo that, so they did receive a copy of the memo, so the correct draft to be looking at is the August 8th draft of the ordinance. I want to make sure you have the right document in front of you.
Our ninth.
I got August 9th.
Yours says August, the memo says August 9th, and then the document.
Oh.
On the,
Okay.
I always look at the, yeah, it took me a while to write, if I worked on the afternoon. So this is the second draft of the ordinance, and this draft is what council, following their August 3rd evening. So there were several different issues that we went over. I can explain the ordinance, but basically, the hotel fee, impact fees are charged for new development. It's so that we can put money into our CIP projects and be able to build the roads and things that we need in the city to offset their, the cost of how much they had to contribute to build the roads. They have to follow the dual rational nexus test. When you set up the dual rational, are y'all familiar with impact fees a little bit?
Mhm,
We haven't
I am.
Okay, we haven't discussed them in a long time. That's why impact fees is the ultimate concurrency issue. So when you have concurrency, impact fees help to meet that, the development to meet those needs that are brought about by new development. It's not to pay for the existing development that's out here and their traveling needs, but it's to pay that additional contribution. So when we set up our impact fees, our road impact fee number for hotels was significantly higher in the calculations than adjoining governments. Because of that, the city council said, well, we'll reduce them for 2 years to comparable rate. And this rate that's in there is the same rate as Lee County and the villages of Estero. It's only to road impact fees. It's not changing the community park or regional park impact fees. So it's a very limited ordinance. It's also only for 2 years. There are a couple hotel projects that are coming through, and so council felt that that was something that we did want to promote and therefore have a reduction, or at least consider promoting it. They haven't adopted it or anything. This is the first step. So it'll go for first reading and second reading in September.
So this is a flat fee that no matter what's the size, how many rooms of the hotel?
No, it's per room.
Per
That
room.
was my question.
Per room.
That's what I thought.
$3,745 per
Per
room.
room. So if you have 100 rooms, it comes out to
300 and, 300 and, yeah.
yeah, it's 1,000. You know, it can be very significant towards progressing towards getting road projects completed. There's another change in this ordinance. One of the folks out in the audience has a project in the interchange area that had a hotel. He is in the middle of obtaining his financing and going through his development order. And the issue was, the way impact fees work is, if you had something on the land, you only pay for the net increase. Okay, so when you hear could be 1,000 rooms, you know, you don't necessarily get impact fee money of 1,000 rooms if you had something already out there. This is the Bonita Exchange project. because he's already out there, because he's already been performing these calculations on the net increase, and we have a provision in the Land Development Code, is Section 2-193, subsection B1, that allows for doing the net increase. Because he was in the process, council said, well, in fairness, we're going to allow somebody to be able to use the higher calculation because he was in the process of getting his permits in order to do so.
Okay, yeah. Carolyn?
Could you explain that a little bit? Can I assume that if he had $100,000 in impact fees, but it previously paid 30, that the difference would be 70? Or is it different? Is it a formula?
How the code reads is it's a change of use impact fee calculation that we go through. So they're responsible for the increase in whatever the use is. So in this case, in order for us to do an apples to apples comparison, we calculate it based on today's dollars. So if he had an 80-room hotel that was built in the late 90s, it got demolished, and now he's going to construct a 150-bed hotel, we would give him credit for that 80-unit hotel in today's dollars, and then assess him today's rates for the 150-room, and you subtract the difference.
Okay,
It's a credit
that's
for
sort
it.
of similar to what I said.
Yes.
If he would be doing $1,000 today for 100 rooms, whatever, how many rooms,
It's all
and he
calculated
had
in today's
did
dollars.
so much before for whatever he had, then it would be a difference. I'm taking it by money, you're taking it by rooms.
Correct.
The rooms would be converted to money anyway, so.
Right.
Right, and also,
Okay.
remember, you can change the use. So if there's a use, it's very easy, if you tear down a use and you're putting the same use back, if you are putting a totally different use, so he'll have commercial, he'll have residential, those uses are different than the hotel use, but he'll be able to use that schedules to offset his impact fee obligation.
But it would still be the same credit because of the number of hotel rooms he'd paid before. I'm getting a yes
Right.
back there.
Yeah, and one final part here, we use a schedule, but if the schedule seems to be unfair or unjust based on circumstances, there's the additional alternative where you can do an independent fee calculation.
Okay.
And that happens from
Okay,
time to time.
and may I ask one more question?
Sure, one more.
No. Right. If they are in the process already, someone putting a development order in, then according to what I read here, since it's not October 21st, 2016 as yet, they would pay the current rate. Is that correct?
Right, impact fees are assessed at time of building permit issuance, so it's contingent on when the building permit comes in and when it's set ready for issuance. So it's the building permit that controls, not the
So
development order
anybody
in
who's
this case.
already in the system would be paying the current rate?
Depending when their permit is ready for issuance, but we do not have any hotels in the system right now.
Okay, so,
And it would behoove people to wait.
and it
Up to
would.
them, but
and
yeah, I
and
would
it-
wait.
Following that same, part of that same question, is it's not clear in here that after October 21st, 2018, that the fee will revert back to the same fee it is today. It's sort of, but not, to me.
Well, I think it's pretty clear because it says October 21st, 26th, and ending on Sunday, which actually means Friday, October 21st, 2018, without further action by city council. This is language that has been used in many
Okay,
reductions.
so that is very clear to anybody coming in to do that,
I would-
that they will then pay the higher rate.
Whatever the
Well,
rate is.
unless the city council does something, right?
Right, we
Right,
may
well,
have an
right,
impact,
of
right,
course.
we may have between now and October 21st, one of the other actions council took was to authorize staff to initiate investigating, doing an impact fee study, certainly for roads, but other impact fees also, to make sure we're using the most recent and localized data.
Okay.
Okay. Sam?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The reason for this is purely economic incentive.
I don't know if it's the only reason for it, but I certainly think that's a strong reason, and that was another discussion before council, was the reporting. In fact, Debbie, whenever these go to, on the agenda, make sure they get the copy of the memo. But when you got the memo originally, in the initial draft, you saw the reporting requirements. Those reporting requirements don't need to be in the ordinance. There's probably, the law is what it is. The city has to report economic development
Right.
incentives, and this would certainly qualify.
Right. Given that, and where these fees go when they're collected, I think council is talking about increasing taxes to pay for road improvement. Bonita Beach Road, has that been discussed?
Actually, what has been discussed is communication services tax, as well as the Florida Power and Light franchise. These are two consumption taxes, not ad valorem taxes.
Okay.
That, again, it's in the discussion stage. They have not adopted anything yet, but that would assist greatly in additional revenue to free up ad valorem.
Well, this reduction amounts to about a 58 to 62% deduction or reduction in the fee. So how do we make up those dollars when we do this, when we take away what we normally collect? And
Well, remember, this reduction only applies to hotels. It does
Right.
not apply to single-family residences.
Right.
It doesn't apply to commercial, to storage, to many other uses. So as far as how many hotels are actually permitted, I would tend to think it's almost a de minimis.
so it's a minor amount considering that the number of hotels is few. But because we are offering it as economic incentive, then we're really asking people to come to build hotels.
Correct. The concern is that we had a couple of hotels that wanted to locate here in the city, and the impact fees were a huge detractor from them wanting to do business in the city because it increases so much more. And there are entities in the audience that can describe how that affects them and how it affects their performance when they want to do hotels. But we have been approached by possibly 3 hotels. Another hotel that will be going near Imperial at some point, they actually did an alternate road impact fee study to reduce the hotel rates, which was approved by our office. So, and that was a concern to some members of council, was what would be the revenue shortfall,
Right.
which then prompted them to have staff come back and give them estimates on a study within the next year or when the county does their study, because typically we would piggyback off of whatever the county does. Usually Duncan and Associates does the studies for them. So we would line up at the same time, so hopefully the study wouldn't cost so much.
So we offer these economic incentives to, I guess, build up the inventory of whatever it is we're given economic incentive to. At some point, you reach a number that fulfills that need, and then you go back to a higher fee. You see where I'm driving at?
Right. This is a 2-year program, and,
Yeah.
and I'll give an example. We have another, for Old 41, we have fee reductions that are very significant. And I can remember Councilman John Spear at the time. So we're talking about 2006, I think we put it in, to see how it would work. And we've continued with that program because it does take quite a while for things to get out of the ground. This is a more limited program than that one.
This may be an attempt, too, on the city's part to spread out the type of businesses that come here, maybe to encourage certain types of industries to come.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Especially in the quadrant, and even east of 75, there is a need for hotels and other type of service industries
Yeah.
for the east part of the city.
Sam, you all set?
When we set the fee of 65, 68, how was that determined? I mean, we're dropping it quite a bit, almost in half or in half.
It was based on the impact fee study that was performed at the time. So an impact fee study, of course, they follow the dual rational nexus test. They look at what projects you have slated in your
Right.
CIP, what's your existing growth, what's your existing other payments, and then they come up with a number. Council has increased impact fees a couple different ways. So just to describe it, when council first, started, Lee County had just performed their impact fee study for roads, and we just piggybacked and we took the same fee numbers. And that was
I see.
perfectly fine because when Duncan and Associates did the calculation at that time, So this is 2000. Those calculations included Bonita Springs. So it was a true study of this area, because that area it was done prior to the election, and Lee County was gearing up, so it made sense to take the change at that time of what Lee County had. The next time we did the study, there were a lot of road projects. Imperial is a good example, widening of US 41, and the old 41 widening. All of these projects we forget about because we're so accustomed to driving it. We forget what the conditions might have been like. And I'm looking at Bob because I know where he is, and I know that there's been significant change from 2000 onwards. So when we changed that fee, council, it went up significantly. It was about a $2,000 fee and I'm thinking single-family residents, I don't look at hotels that much, to about a $6,000, and council tiered it over, so projects from a certain date would have the lower fee, and then, I mean, not as low as what it was raised, but then it had a bigger raise 2 years later. And that was perfect because you're looking at 2004, 2006, when growth was very much on a high swing. Council then changed it again, maybe that was 2003, 2005. In 2006, when council did the next study, because remember, the study should be every 3 years. We've been a little bit behind on that. When council did the next change, the issue was, do we want to go to the full amount of the fee or not? And council at that time said, yes, we want the highest fee possible. Now, during the Great Recession, council did not reduce the fee. The county did that, again, trying to incentivize development. We maintained our fee because we also knew it takes a while to gear up again, to change your fee, and that worked out successfully. Now we're at crossroads where we do need to look at our road impact fees. We need to perform those studies, and this is just a temporary stopgap measure.
And so we're finding out that the fee, to be competitive, our fee is much too high. So we need to reduce that fee to be more competitive with Lee County and
There's
Estero.
different trains of thoughts. I can't
Yeah.
say whether that is accurate or not. I think that's a policy call.
How's that, Sam?
Yeah.
Meg?
Thank you very much.
I was concerned that there never seems to be a backup here. You know, what's the definition of success and what's the definition of failure? I mean, 2 years from now is not very far away. How will council decide 2 years from now whether or not to keep this pricing in place or to raise it? Because raising it always creates hell.
It does, and that's one of the things, if you look at the earlier draft that's actually in the backup, I still think that council will be, if you look at the former paragraph 4 in the July 21st draft, that had two prongs in it. The first prong was something that Lee County has done, where Lee County required its county manager to collect certain data. Council did not feel it was necessary to keep that sentence in there, but would still perform metrics to determine the success or non-success, hopefully not failure, in adopting this ordinance. And then the second prong, the part that starts consistent with Florida statute section 166.021, this is just, this is what the law is. So it doesn't need to be in there. But it is something that, is a reporting requirement the city has an obligation to do when it does things for economic development, because economic development is a public purpose. We want to have economic development, but you also need to be very careful because you're spending money, to assist private businesses, and that's problematic.
So what will happen in 2 years?
Council will decide at that time.
And have we lost business because of the higher rate structure?
Possibly.
Possibly, did you say, or probably?
Possibly. We can't tell. It depends. We'll find out if this gets passed. If it doesn't, then there's people in the room that could, again, explain it better.
How does this compare, you say Lee County and Bonita Springs, how does it compare to North Naples, for instance? really just across the street.
For North Naples, so for this, not City of Naples, but for Collier County, it's very different. And actually, their rates for roads were lower. But in terms of the total costs, Collier County assesses different impact fees, and the fire district rates are different. But for roads, we were higher.
We're higher in the existing basis or
Yes.
the
In the existing, we are
the
higher.
proposed? Okay.
Any other, you done? You
That's all,
said?
thank you.
Bob?
There's a little bit of a backup. You know, the question was, do we know if we lost any possible new businesses in the town because of the fee structure? Well, in the very beginning, most developers do a pro forma, and they don't contact the city or the county. They know immediately what their upfront fees are. If it doesn't look good, they walk away. So the city probably won't even know who walked away because they've never come to the city because of the fees are public information. They do their numbers, they said, we'll go somewhere else. So a lot of times you don't even know.
That's
I mean, I've
especially,
seen it. I was involved in a lot of them.
it's especially true with these big national chains, Hampton Inns and those type of people. They have hundreds of these all over the world.
So that's why being competitive is very important.
That's right, yeah. Any other questions here in the panel?
I just wanted to say something because I'd done some research on this too.
Go ahead.
And this is sort of going in the other direction, and I'm not quite sure. I'm still thinking this over, because I see this whole issue as do one thing, you get one result, and do another thing, you get another result, and something pops up here when you do something here that you're not expecting. But by and large, this article I was reading that says a lot of the developers and the people who oppose the impact fees realize in the long run that it benefits them. So with the impact fees in place, they can be fairly certain that the infrastructure and facilities needed by their new development will be provided. So I think that in some ways that's a good thing and helps us do a better job providing for those things. So there definitely is, there's the incentive idea on one side, and then there is actually, even though the developers initially don't like it, there is the other side where they do benefit from it. So I don't know where that leaves us. The other thing is the 2-year length of time that this will be going on. I don't know if that was chosen maybe because you know some hotels that want to come in and you specifically want them to come, which to me is kind of favoritism. I don't know either whether the 2 years is a good time. Maybe a year would be a better choice. So if you want to comment.
I think a year would be too short, and the reason being is if they needed to do any type of zoning action or if they needed to get their site development permits, they still need to come through our office for their horizontal construction, permitting through South Florida Water Management District, and then they have to go and get the building permits prepared, get those construction drawings. So I think a year would be too short. I think 2 years is pretty good, and I believe that's how we've done the change of use ordinance previously with the ability to extend if council felt it was necessary. So 2 years is definitely something that's consistent.
Well, you haven't lived in, unless you've gone through the permitting process.
Yeah.
You don't have to go back and advertise this for 90 days when you raise the rates at the end of this time, do you?
Yeah.
You do. So you have,
If anytime you raise rates, you have a 90-day effective date.
even though it's provided for now in this.
No, here you wouldn't.
Okay,
the
that's
way it's
my
drafted, right.
question.
So that shaves off, right. If we have
90
to do
days.
another implementing ordinance, now most likely we'll have different rates in 2 years. We'll
You know-
probably be ready for the
You know,
new
this
rates.
discussion here probably is more of a political, maybe a political discussion, and our function here is to decide whether or not these changes meet the comprehensive plan, and we'll leave the politics up to the council. At least that's my opinion.
Well, I think that too, if you're not competitive, you realize the results of that pretty quick. However, if you reduce the fee, then we would get probably some hotels to come here. We have other safeguards that help us in the design, the planning, the traffic, and so forth. So the idea is to get them here.
Yeah, you hit on my next question about the safeguards, because that was, I was going, I'm learning a lot here, so bear with me. Is there any, other than zoning, is there any restriction on the size or the place where the hotels can go?
Yes, as far as, there's zoning, but there's also design standards in Chapter 3, as far as, which provides limits. You have the comp plan, which also provides limits. For example, hotels are commercial use, correct? So you would not see new hotels being added to Little Hickory Island or the island areas.
Okay,
Hotels are favored in the interchange. You would see hotels being targeted to that area.
okay, okay.
At this point, I'd like to turn it over to, if everybody's set here, I'd like to turn it over to the public for comment. Please make out your form. Are we still doing that, Audrey?
Yes, if,
This is a known quantity in front of us, but that's okay.
I mean, it's up to the.
Go
clerk.
ahead. Go ahead, Rick.
She knows him.
Yes, Rick Steinmeier, citizen of Bonita Springs, taxpayer for 67 years. You all want to raise my taxes on my property and on my phone bill and on my electric bill, and you're going to give some stranger that's out of town a $500,000 tax break. You might call it a fee, but it's a tax. And people in Bonita Springs, let's come and raise hell with these people, because they're raising our taxes and giving away to, and this is a special interest group. It doesn't, the people that wrote these fees, we paid to have them write the fees. They didn't know what they were doing then, and we don't know what we're doing now, I guess. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the, yes, sir?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mike Maurer. I represent the Burnwood properties, which are the two largest commercial properties in the city. We have a 110-acre park on Old 41. We also have an 80-acre park at Bonita Beach Road and I-75 adjacent to Publix out at the interchange. We also now own the northeast quadrant, which is the Bonita 75 CPD. Bonita's growing. You guys see it out east. There's more rooftops going up. And as more rooftops go up, more people visit. They visit their grandparents, they visit their parents, and they need some place to sleep. Hotels are needed, and they're based upon rooftops. I've heard a lot from the comment just made and some of the concerns about this being favoritism or purely economic incentive. To a degree, that's true, but it's more about fairness and competitiveness. And if we are 60% higher than Lee County or Estero and roughly 50% higher than Collier County, if you're a hotel developer, you're going to look at those sites before you look at Bonita. And we have a budding competitive land product that is an alternative, and rather than lose those businesses and lose those jobs that hotels create, each hotel, a 200-room hotel, is going to create about 50 jobs, 35 full-time, 15 part-time, with the managers making around $70,000 down to the maids that are going to be making roughly $28,000 to $30,000. It's about fairness. It's nobody's fault that this kind of slipped through the cracks. The truth of the matter is now, for the first time in 7 years, we're building buildings again. And this came to light. It was a surprise to me that it was this far out of whack. But I think as commercial construction comes back, and I think that's why City Council is going to go through a comprehensive impact fee study, you're going to see that certain impact fees are out of whack as it relates to Lee County and Estero and northern Collier County. We have lost businesses. My signs are out on the road. The properties are marketed on the internet. I talk to businesses every day looking to locate in Bonita, and a lot of eyes are on us. And we have lost businesses. We've lost a 5,000 square foot warehouse that was looking to go in front of the light manufacturing facility with a little retail in front of the charter school. Royal Scoop, been in business for 30 years. David Zimmerman, fine businessman, does a lot for the community. Would have been a great use right in front of the charter school. He went to go meet with his engineer, and the impact fees for his business would have been $120,000. And he was only going to pay $400,000 for the dirt. That amounts to a tax of roughly 28%. We lost a 50,000 square foot manufacturing facility out at the Burnwood Park and Commerce because of the same thing. The impact fees were throwing the deals out of whack. Certain impact fees are fine. They don't need to be touched if you look at them. But some of them, as we go through this process, you're going to see as we compare to Estero and Lee County and Collier County, they need to be looked at. Specifically with this use with hotel, with it being that far out of whack, and the current players that are looking at putting up hotels in the city, specifically at the Burnwood Park of Commerce at the interchange, they feel like they're getting scalped under the current schedule. And they, say, Mike, why is it going to cost me $900,000 to pick up my building permit, where if I did it in Lee County, or if I did it in Estero, or if I did it in Collier County, it would be $600,000. And I didn't have an answer for that. So that's kind of the reason why this came to fruition. There's a need for hotels. There's a need for jobs, and I think it's going to benefit the city, and it's something that is not being asked for eternity. It's only a 2-year window, and as Jacqueline hinted, that 2-year window, even that's pushing it for anybody that starts the process now to be able to get their rights. It's going to be an 18 to 24-month process for land that's not zoned. For land that is zoned, it's still going to take a year to 18 months to be able to break ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just add something?
Yes.
And it's something I learned when I was a kid, and it seems to be something that probably needs to be reiterated, so I'm going to talk about my father for a few seconds. My father explained to me that you should be very thankful for the tourist who comes here, because the tourist shoulders the burden of most of the taxes in the state of Florida. And the reason they do so, just so you understand, in addition to gas tax, because if they're traveling by car or airlines, that you pay the different taxes there, the bed tax that Lee County imposes is $5,000, or sorry, is 5% in addition to the sales tax. So if you've ever stayed at a hotel and you've looked at your hotel tax room, you look at it and go, oh my God, this is huge. And of course you pay it because that's just the way how life is. We would not have certain facilities in the city of Bonita Springs but for the hotel and tourism tax that's out there. And that includes Bonita Springs River Park, which was funded mostly from tourist tax. They went and did a lot of improvements. Every year we go before Lee County, before the Visitor Convention Bureau, and we do make a request there. So that's the bed tax. It's a 5% difference, and it's a Lee County tax. It's county-wide, so they build in Estero versus us. That goes on. Communication services tax. Hotels pay a significant amount of communication services tax, and if any of you ever in a hotel room get one of the movies, like especially if you have kids, so wait, Jackie, you're going to get this wonderful pleasure. For 24 hours they can watch the same movie over and over, at the hotel. You end up paying the rental fee, but you also pay the CST on that, the communication services tax. Plus the hotels, indirectly you pay it because the hotels pick up the tab for the phones and everything else. That is part of it. And of course, sales tax, which it's remitted to the state, but then we get our cut back from that also. So I understand what Mr. Steinmeier says. I understand how he feels, because I also live in Bonita Springs. I'm not a big fan of having to pay more. That's called normal, how you feel. But the tourist is the one who does pay a significant amount. So there is offset from, if you do receive more hotels.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Any more comments from the panel?
I have a comment, but it's a little on the side, because part of this talks about number 4, council gave staff direction to proceed with an impact fee study. And just on the sideline, I'm still concerned about emergencies and shelters. Is it possible they could include that in the study?
That's a whole
And
nother.
that
no.
is in the comp plan that
Yes.
allows that.
But that is a whole nother subject matter, and let me explain why. Impact, that calculation comes from Lee County. We have it in our ordinance. It doesn't mean it doesn't need to be updated. And I'll look at Jackie for that, because I think we're looking at shelters and updating some of the shelter and certainly coastal high hazard. But that's different than the impact fees. In fact, when council did their discussion, and it was a great conversation. It was very complicated, and we had to break it down into elements for the council. Whether to go with road impact fee or road and the community parks, because the fire impact fee is done countywide, as well as the school impact fee is a countywide, school fire, EMS is countywide, and so is the emergency shelter.
Okay.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that, it just means it's not the city's place. It doesn't mean that we don't need to revise our regulations. It doesn't mean we don't need to update it. That is the province of the Public Safety
Well,
Department.
where does the money that the comp plan allows go? Does it go to the county, or is there any money for that? And the second thing is that we've had this since we became a city, and we still don't have any shelters. I'm kind of likening
I
it
think
to
we're
the.
getting off the subject a little bit,
little-
Carolyn.
Completely
a
off the
little bit,
subject,
I
but
know.
we discussed this issue.
But it is part about the impact fee study. That's why I'm
They're
bringing it
separate.
up.
Right, and we discussed this the other day on the phone. I spent
we
an
did.
hour with you.
Right,
And
you
I
did.
explained to you that as far as shelters, you need to meet American Red Cross standards for shelters, and because we're low-lying, we're not going to have shelters built locally. If you need a shelter, which incidentally, as we also discussed, shelters are last resort, that's not where you want to stay. The shelters will be built in places where you can, I feel like Alex Grant,
Yeah.
the soil, where the topography is better
Right,
suited for
right.
shelters.
And I'm not looking to put 47,000 people in shelters. That would be ridiculous, but sometimes you have to shelter 100 or whatever.
The shelters,
I'm not
and there's
sure.
two types of shelters. There's shelters during the emergency, shelters after the emergency,
Uh,
post-emergency. Post-emergency shelters were fine in Bonita Springs. We do have plenty of them. It's the pre-shelter that is the issue, or during
Okay,
the storm,
okay.
that's the issue.
All I'm saying is it possible we could look at that? I feel like it's like the library. We keep paying to the library, but we don't get our share back. So I feel like.
It is
with the
something that's
shelters-
being looked at, but it's not something that's in the that's the,
That's
council-
all that I'm hoping, if they're gonna do
Okay.
a study, that they look at that, see what's happening, see what we
It's not a
need.
Duncan and
yeah.
Associates study type process. If we could, I mean, that's something that council could contemplate, try to break away from Lee County on it. But it's not within the province as we are currently structured.
Okay, and that's all.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
I'd like to make this motion in favor of this because I think for the use and for what it will do for Bonita Springs in enticing visitors to come, and the fact that we could change it if we need to in the future, I'd like to propose that the ordinance be accepted as pertaining to the impact fees in Bonita Springs, reducing the rate of the collection of road, community park, recreation park impact fees for hotels.
Oh, the title block changed.
It did?
Okay, yes.
and the fact that it meets the comprehensive plan, right?
Yes, it's consistent with the comp plan. The title block, and I probably read the old title block because I read the agenda. It is now an ordinance pertaining to the impact fees in Bonita Springs, reducing the rate of collection of road impact fees. so
Okay.
Just road, for hotels for the duration of 2 years, providing for conflicts of law.
Okay, I
All right.
accept that
Do we have a s-
correction.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Bob? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Audrey?
The next is an amendment to the Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Chapter 4, amending Section 4-53, Functions and Authority of City Council, requiring an affirmative vote of 5 or more council members for any decision by City Council to adopt or amend a land use ordinance specifically related to height and density matters, including comprehensive plan amendments, land development regulations, or any zoning application, including plan developments, variances, and special exceptions, which have the effect or of increasing the height or density for any particular project or part of a project, providing for conflicts of law, severability, codification, scrivener's errors, inclusion in code, and effective date. This ordinance will be heard by city council on same as the other ordinance before you, September 7th and September 21st will be the public hearings on this ordinance. Just to go through the city council voting requirements, council requested this, and I have done some research. I also received some input from Mr. Theriak, and I want to go over some of that discussion as to the research. I was initially asked by city council pretty early, as soon as the new council came on board, to do a city survey of other communities that have similar type provisions. There are Cocoa Beach, Ponce Inlet, Anna Maria Island are all communities that have some form of supermajority requirement. Now remember, City of Bonita Springs does have a supermajority requirement already in place if you don't have everybody present on city council, because our charter requires an affirmative vote of 4 for any affirmative action to be taken by council. So that means that if you had only 4 members there, you'd have to have unanimous. If you had, so on, you'd have a supermajority, any number where you don't have all 7. I also looked at case law and found that it used to be, prior to home rule powers, in order for a higher government, the council, the commission, to overturn the zoning board's decision on variances, they would need to have a supermajority. So you had the zoning board spending the time working on whether to grant a variance or not. That stayed below. That never went up to city council. Our practice is for that all to go to city council and for everything to be a recommendation. And prior to home rule power, so this is pre-1973, that was a requirement. I'm looking at Bob if he remembers any of this, or is this before his time?
Cobwebs are coming back.
Cobwebs are
Bob, you
coming
don't
back.
go back that far.
All of a sudden, he's getting a little itchy, going, oh, I remember this one case.
Yeah.
But because I had to resurrect what I was reading when I was reading the case law to figure out what the heck, and then realized what was happening, around the state of Florida. And of course, no ordinances have it now, because once 1973 occurred, we had home rule power. We went away from that state statute process. And the city of Bonita Springs does have some supermajority requirements already in place. So this is not a first time for City of Bonita Springs. We do it for emergencies. We also do it for removal of beach renourishment reserves, so that the pocket of money on Hickory Island for the sand can't be taken out for general purposes for other reasons. We don't have to put money in every year, but once we put that money in, we're not allowed to take it out of the separate fund unless it's approved to take it out by 5 to 7. And also for certain art projects. Now, we've never purchased any art around $100,000, but if we ever get into that position, that does require 5 of 7. It's not something that can be done with 4 of 3. And so you do have supermajority voting. It is something that is legal. Now, I mentioned that Mr. Theriak provided me with some comments. So the comments that he had, and I'm going to kind of say they were a little cryptic. He pointed me to 2 cases. One was a DOA hearing officer, and I believe the DOA hearing officer found it valid, and then it went above that to the next level, and which was the agency, because it was a recommended order by the DOA hearing officer, and the agency disagreed with it, or maybe it was vice versa, the orders, but it all hinged on what's called substantive versus procedural. If adopting the voting requirement is a procedural act, it's the process of going forward, it's perfectly fine and dandy. Everybody's being treated the same, and it's very fair. You can adopt this. If everyone's deciding the zoning case or whatever reason related to density and height, and they're voting based on the record, and the record supports just one way, and they're all voting one way because they're reviewing it based on the record, God bless. It's perfect. The problem comes out is sometimes people do not vote based on the record. They vote based on not the substantial competent evidence. They vote on maybe polling, which we know is not allowed. In other words, um, Village Walk may come in, all wearing their red T-shirts or green T-shirts, whatever color, to show that they're in unity and to object something. Well, that's not a valid reason to vote on something a certain way. It's certainly a political reason and certainly creates a political pressure to vote a certain way, but it's not something that, I have to stand here and say, council, you can't vote based on the fact that you have this mob ready to, do political issues to you. I won't say political harm, but, something that'll influence them, and they'll say, yes, we understand, and you can kind of question whether they truly feel that or not. That's a very difficult situation. So that's where you get into substantive due process. If adopting this ordinance is being done to pack the deck, against people, then it's not valid.
Okay.
So
Yep.
that's the argument against it. That's the argument for it.
All right,
Good luck.
thank you. Any comments, from anybody on the board? You can-
I think it is being done for political reasons, and that kind of thing changes obviously from council to council, but I think there's a lot of validity in requiring a supermajority. So
Yeah.
I have a mixed feeling about it.
And I am very mixed too. I'm here now. I still haven't made a determination. I think it is something that could come back to bite us. We're working fine now with the majority of 4. I don't know if this makes things better or worse. I don't know.
Well, our function, as I've said before, is just to see whether it's compatible with the comprehensive plan, and I presume that the city council will win or lose elections based upon votes like this, but
And, very
Yeah.
difficult.
any other comments? Any comments from the public? Do we have a motion? Bob?
Maybe we should discuss it more, if no one has a comment.
Can you tell us any more, Audrey?
Can
Can you give me cases?
provisions to you. I can pull
Pro-
cases if you want.
Pro and con cases where it's, worked well
Courts
and
have
they,
found that the
and it
courts have
hasn't.
upheld it, and I will say from a legal standpoint, when I went into this project researching to find where it's illegal. I mean, I did. I went into this research. I don't want to say too much, but I'm sure somebody upstairs, and I'm not talking religiously, I'm talking upstairs in our facility, is thinking about words that I actually said when the expletives, when I found out I was going to have this project. So I was very surprised when I found research to the contrary. So when I delved into it, I was a doubting Thomas, that would be a polite way, and found it legal. My only reservation is how it's applied, and that's, I'm sending you something, it's like you and me, we cannot necessarily deal with these issues in a vacuum, because in a vacuum, we don't have the facts that are being applied to the situation. Once we have facts to apply to the situation, we can say, yeah, that was good, or no, it's not. I mean, and I can argue both ways. You don't need a supermajority, because if the facts warrant to deny something and you have substantial competent evidence to deny, then that's fine. And all this creates is a procedural defect for you to have one more challenge to deal when you're dealing with the litigation involved in the challenges. And we get sued. I prefer to have procedurally clean so that there is no question. Everybody knows it was a fair hearing. They might not like the result, but it's a fair hearing. That's where the packing of the deck issue, and if it creates a substantive due process problem. I think in the comp plan, because we do want to follow the comp plan, and so let me go to right in the beginning, and Jackie, you may help on some of this. Is it fair? I mean, is it something that this is going to provide, probably need future land use? So when you read the very beginning, section, as the vision and sentiment of the future council should be, does it meet those criterias? I don't know. Jackie, you're my planner.
Well, the comp plan, there's really nothing pertaining to supermajorities. I think it.
No, it comes
Right.
up to the voting issue of, does this create a situation of packing the deck? Does this create something that creates a substantial unfairness? So when you look at the vision and sentiment that's contained in the comprehensive plan and Bonita Springs tomorrow, the vision, we want human scale. We want things to appreciate the natural environment, the walkable community. Just going down, is this a community with a heart social center? I
Is
don't
this
know.
really a comp plan issue?
It's a
That's a good question, Bob. I'm not,
issue.
I'm not,
I don't
It-
see it as a comp plan issue in my
Well,
mind.
if it is a procedural issue, then, no, it's not. If it's a substantive issue. Now, what I did for a safeguard in the draft ordinance, and very similar to communication towers, there are times when I did the research, there are places, among the state of Florida, where, they apply what's called Dillon's rule. So, Florida's a home rule authority, home rule powers. Dillon's rule is the opposite. Maybe some of you came from a Dillon's rule state. So a Dillon's rule state says you have only the powers that the state gives you. So depending on whether you follow the powers the state gives you or whether you have the power to emanate home rule powers makes all the difference in whether supermajorities are legal or not legal. So in Nevada, for example, which follows Dillon's rule, supermajorities were not held to be valid. And what I did, because we have some issues that are federal law, and some issues were state and were for certain state issues where the requirement would be invalidated, because if there's a statute and says you just need a quorum for something, then in that statute, that's the controlling factor. So let's say it's a communication tower, and the FCC regulations, and you go through all of it, and it says you only need a quorum, then having more than a quorum would violate that statute or that federal law provision. And we'll need to also go through our provisions to see if we have things that say you just need a quorum for that vote.
but Audrey, if it's
I
a,
have that in there.
if it's a procedural thing, then it doesn't, then that's not something that comes under us, is it?
Well, in my opinion, I think where it relates to the comp plan and whether or not it's something that we want to make sure, because of the subject of the amendment, could have a significant impact on the vision as set forth in the comp plan, maybe at that point it could become a comp plan issue, because if you see the types of applications that they want the supermajority for, it's for height increase and for density increase, and that might be to help
So that's kind of
the
kind of an
concerns.
indirect,
So, because the comp plan was very specific when it was adopted, that there was, in no instance did they want buildings over 75 feet. So I believe that was to address that concern. And then for density issues, especially as it relates to coastal high hazard. And I think most of it does stem from the pending applications that would be coming before us soon.
okay.
I think that, if you have 4 councilmen voting substantially for the project, you have 3 against, they've got to convince one of the 3 to vote in their favor to get the supermajority. But if the majority at the time, 4, is voting on substantive issues, then you're asking that 5th person to make an interesting decision, whether it's promoted by their desire to favor the developer or some other reason.
Right, and let me add to that. One of the problems with this ordinance is it's called legislative entrenchment. You're putting yourself in a situation where the majority must yield to the minority view. If you have just 2 people or 3 people, let's say you don't have a full deck that day. Instead of having the 7 council members, you have 5 council members present, or 2 are not allowed to vote because they have some disqualification or they're not available, they're out of town. in that situation, you have 5 people, you need to have unanimous, because council did not tell me to write it where you could have less. You basically have the minority viewpoint controlling council's decision. You know, there you're looking at some fundamental fairness issues. And again, it's as applied, depending on what happens. So that's where the ordinance can be problematic from a legal standpoint. Either people don't want to vote because they have the people in the polling or things that won't constitute substantial competent evidence, and that happens. I wish to say that it never does. Council always votes because they only listen to Jackie and the evidence correctly, but that doesn't always happen. That's not realistic. So, I mean, there are times where, you know, there probably should be additional safeguards, and we do have that one safeguard for if it's something where the quorum is the requirement by state law, you know, we have to follow that process, or federal law. But we don't have it for other things. What do we deal with absences? Absences, or worse, voting conflicts. I've been in voting conflicts on a purchase of land where I had 2 folks disqualified from voting and another one accused of possibly having a voting conflict. And I mean, at that point, I was, getting very, very difficult whether or not something can get approved. And that, again, goes towards, substantive due process. Do you want the minority?
And the amendment does specifically say including comprehensive plan amendments.
Mm-hmm.
Which are
Oh.
legislative, but then you also have rezoning application, which, depending on the underlying zoning, may only allow so many dwelling units, but then when you go through rezoning, because they can congregate the units, would be an increase in density.
Which the
So
comp
then-
plan talks about clustering as something, so you might be defeating clustering by adoption of this.
Well, the thing is, you've got some very important issues here that directly impact a comprehensive plan. And you're asking a 5th person to take a leap of faith and put his council seat online by having a supermajority. And most probably would not leap like that. But, so it's a hard decision. I mean, if we leave it like it is, then whoever wants the exception only has to convince 4 of the 7.
I guess the question, is it broken? Are we trying to fix something that's broken, or is it fine the way it is?
Right, that's the question I asked myself was, why are we looking at this?
Hmm. Well, we can decide that it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan. Nothing says we can't do that.
If it's a situation where having this type of vote, the change in density does not support clustering, doesn't support the vision of walkability, yeah, I think it would be inconsistent.
Right, we have a good comp plan, and if the height is 75 feet, why do you need to push that further? Well, the arguments should come from the 4 that want to vote for it.
If I may suggest, because for me it helps a lot when I take a real-life example and apply it. So in this instance, consider with the Raptor Bay amendment that may be coming back forth for rezoning. If the Bonita Grand Mine comes in for a special overlay through the comp plan and companion zoning case, those are going to be instances where height is a subject of discussion and an increase in density. In those cases, would you recommend that items like that, cases like that, be decided with a supermajority, or as it stands with the 4? Because those could have significant changes to how the city redevelops. It's not just the existing comp plan, because in comp plan amendments, you will have situations where they're proposing to amend the text of the comp plan. So in those situations, for those applications that could definitely have significant changes, do you think a supermajority would be?
So that we're not hearing if there's a compelling reason to have a supermajority. I mean, why does simple majority not work? We do that with almost everything else we do in society. It's a simple
thing is-
majority vote.
How do we apply bonus density in the comp plan? If bonus density is now an increase in density, do I now need council to approve that 5 to 7 as opposed to 4 to 3?
But your arguments for that are based on substance.
Well,
fact,
that's where the attacks are gonna come from.
right.
But
Right.
you're already allowed bonus density in the comp plan.
But this is increasing the
circumstances.
density now, so if it creates an increase, do I now need a 5 of 7, say a density agreement, a bonus density agreement?
I guess I'm not seeing where you
Well,
would need
that's-
that if it already allows it in the comp
And that's
plan.
where we might need some clarification from council is what does increase in density mean? Because your comp plan does allow you to have a maximum up to density, but when you rezone, I mean, that doesn't, you're increasing your units by rezoning, whether it be by your development standards, so you can actually develop the land to allow more units.
But subjectivity gets involved here. We say, what are you going to give me if I give you that? It always comes to subjectivity. So having 5, my feeling is not absolutely necessary. This is not compelling enough.
I echo that statement.
What's that, Bob?
I echo what Sam said.
Yeah, I do too, I think, but I'm not quite sure how to phrase that to answer this.
Well, I would think the way to phrase it is to just say that we don't feel that it's appropriate with the comprehensive plan. In other words, a negative motion rather than a positive motion.
So inconsistent with the comp plan because it affects times where density and clustering is more appropriate, higher
What-
density for clustering.
what she
is more
said.
appropriate.
Do we have that in the motion? Would somebody want to make that motion, or you want to discuss it some more? Or?
No?
Chairman, can I have a quick comment?
Yeah, very quick, Rick.
Okay. 5 people is harder to corrupt than 4 people. 7 people is rather than 6 people, where you have more people, more councilmen coming to the meetings, and you have a less chance of corruption. Of putting 4 people together, you get a click. 5 people is harder to get a click. That's my opinion, and I think something that's important is a comprehensive plan should be a supermajority. Thank you.
So
Thank
Rick,
you.
would that be called a super corruption?
Super corrupt. Yeah. I know you're in the sunshine, but I know that.
Okay, so,
And I added to this, so that the motion, as I understand it, based on the discussions, it's inconsistent with the comp plan because it affects times where clustering high density would be appropriate and could affect the substantial portion of substantive rights of applications.
Right. I make a motion to accept that interpretation.
do we have a second? We have a second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you, Audrey. Okay. Next meeting is scheduled for September 8th, 2016. Take it that will work with everybody?
Okay, with me.
I
Nope,
think so.
No, not with Bob?
no.
How about you, Carolyn?
I don't know yet. It's probably fine.
Meg?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, so we'll leave it there, and then if it becomes an issue, we can change it, huh?
And just so you know, we have a couple of items coming before that board, possibly some information regarding the EAR. Will be
Okay.
coming forward, and then some changes to Chapter 4 for schedule of uses. We're modernizing our use groups. Miss
Modernizing
Crespo.
what?
Our use groups.
Oh,
They
good,
haven't been updated in decades,
good,
so.
good.
mhm.
Okay, you have a motion to approve the minutes of,
I have a comment first on minutes.
yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I think that one of the places where I spoke on page 2, I don't think they got what I was really meaning. In a minute, not page 2. It was where they were talking about, let me find it. I had asked where one person,
There's
can one
there's a
person
comment
speak
by
for
you
all?
down at the bottom of page 2.
wait a minute, it was where they asked about one person speaking for all. Oh, shoot, I can't find it now. Am I looking at? I had that. I will find it. I'm sorry to hold you up. I just wanted to tweak the meaning. Oh, yeah, page 2, the 9:15, 19 a.m. the second sentence, city attorney explained there will be a swearing in, and then she also asked whether one person, that was me, can speak for a group. And I wasn't meaning, can one person speak for a group? What I was kind of referring to was something that happened in city council a couple of years ago, where they were trying to reduce the time at the microphone, and they were saying something about, if you come in a big group, only have one person speak. And I spoke against that, and the city council agreed that people should have their say. So what the meaning here was that many, more or less that many people could speak from that group, not to limit it. I'm not explaining that very well, am I?
Debbie, you got that? So we'd make that as a part of the motion to approve? You make the motion, Meg,
I'd
to
make
approve the minutes?
I
with
make the motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
With the correction, yep.
the
And
correction.
second?
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.